Laura and Robert Mitchell seemed like the picture of a perfect marriage, 20 years of love, hard work, and quiet small-town life. But when Laura discovered that her 50-year-old husband had secretly sold her beloved truck to fund the lavish lifestyle of his 22-year-old lover, the woman everyone thought they knew disappeared forever. What followed was a chilling story of betrayal, rage, and a brutal act that shocked an entire town. Laura Mitchell had spent more than 20 years building a quiet, predictable life in the small Texas suburb of Willow Creek. She was 46, strong from years of running her landscaping business, and known in town for her dependability. Her husband, Robert, was 4 years older, a heavy-set man with a calm smile and a reputation for being practical and hardworking. Together, they seemed to represent stability, two people who had weathered life's storms and found comfort in routine. Their home sat on the edge of a quiet street surrounded by oak trees, a place filled with the smell of cut grass and fresh coffee. Neighbors often waved when Laura drove by in her silver pickup truck, a symbol of her independence and pride. From the outside, everything looked perfect. The couple attended Sunday service, hosted backyard barbecues, and appeared side by side at local charity events. Laura believed that trust and loyalty were the foundation of their marriage. She handled most of the business finances while Robert managed the physical labor. Their company had grown slowly but steadily, allowing them to live modestly without debt. They didn't have children, but Laura filled her days with work and caring for her aging mother. Yet behind the calm and carefully kept routines, something invisible had begun to shift. Robert had grown distant, distracted during conversations, and less interested in the things that once made him laugh. He often claimed to be tired or preoccupied with business. Laura noticed the late nights, the extra showers, and the faint smell of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his shirts. She tried to convince herself that it was nothing. But deep down, she felt it, the quiet tremor of something breaking beneath the surface of their so-called perfect marriage. The silver pickup truck had always been Laura's most treasured possession. She bought it after years of saving from small landscaping jobs, working through blistering summers and long winters. Every dent and scratch on it told a story of hard work, independence, and pride. The truck wasn't just transportation, it was freedom. It carried her tools, her dreams, and her sense of identity. Robert had often joked that she loved it more than him, and Laura would laugh, brushing it off, never realizing how close that statement would one day come to truth. She remembered the day she bought it vividly, the scent of new leather, the thrill of signing her own name on the papers without asking anyone for help. That truck had carried her through every chapter of her adult life, and she took care of it like a member of the family. Robert had once promised her they'd never sell it, not for any reason. To Laura, that promise meant trust. It meant partnership. But one quiet morning, that symbol of everything she had worked for was gone. Laura stepped out of the house with her coffee mug, expecting to see the familiar shimmer of silver under the rising sun. Instead, the driveway was empty. Her heart sank as confusion turned to panic. She checked the garage, then the street, thinking maybe Robert had moved it. Nothing. She called his phone, but it went unanswered. Hours passed, and her worry twisted into anger. She went through the papers in the house, the keys, the bills, searching for some explanation. When she found none, her stomach dropped. Something wasn't right. The one thing she trusted to always be there had vanished overnight, and deep down, she already sensed who was behind it. At first, Laura tried to convince herself that the truck had been stolen. It was the only explanation that made sense. She called the local police, pacing the living room as she gave them the details: make, model, color, and plate number. The officer on the phone promised to check recent impound reports and used vehicle records. Laura hung up feeling uneasy but hopeful that the truck would be recovered soon. She told herself that Robert must have gone out early, maybe to run errands, maybe to handle a job site issue. Yet as the day turned into night and he still hadn't returned, the silence grew heavier. 2 days later, the police called back. The news was worse than she could have imagined. The truck hadn't been stolen, it had been sold. The sale was registered legally, complete with ownership transfer and signature. The problem was, the signature wasn't hers. Laura's hands shook as she stared at the emailed copy of the papers. Her name was forged in clumsy handwriting, but the address and ID number were correct. The buyer had paid in cash. Her heart pounded as she replayed every moment of the past week, searching for signs she might have missed. Robert had been unusually cheerful, humming while shaving, checking his phone constantly. She had brushed it off as stress relief after long work hours. Now she saw it for what it was, deceit hiding in plain sight. The betrayal didn't just sting, it burned. That truck represented years of her labor, her pride, and her independence. And her husband, the man she trusted most, had taken it from her without hesitation. The realization left her numb. What else had he been hiding? Laura couldn't let it go. Every time she looked at the empty space in the driveway, a new wave of anger rose inside her. She needed answers. That night, while Robert slept soundly beside her, she got out of bed, heart pounding, and quietly began searching through his things. She opened drawers, rifled through papers, and checked the files in his old metal cabinet. What she found made her blood run cold. Inside an envelope labeled business expenses were several receipts from hotels in nearby cities. Each was for a single night, paid in cash. The names on the invoices matched places she had never stayed, and the dates lined up perfectly with the weekends Robert claimed to be working late. She kept digging and found bank statements hidden under a pile of old bills. There were multiple large withdrawals, sometimes $1,000 at a time, from their joint account. The money had vanished without explanation. Then she noticed something more disturbing. Repeated transfers to a name she didn't recognize, Chloe R. The payments were small at first, but over the months they grew, totaling thousands of dollars. Her stomach twisted. Jewelry purchases, spa payments, designer handbags, all charged to their account. Laura felt dizzy. Robert had always been careful with money, sometimes even strict about it. Now she realized why. He wasn't saving. He was spending, and not on her. The final confirmation came when she found a new credit card bill with a delivery address she didn't know. He'd rented an apartment in the city under his name. The pieces fell together with painful clarity. Robert hadn't just sold her truck for cash. He'd sold it to fund another woman's life. The name Chloe R. echoed in Laura's mind like a haunting tune she couldn't turn off. She needed to know who this woman was. Her hands trembled as she searched social media late into the night, typing the name into every platform she could think of. Then, she found her, Chloe Reynolds, a 22-year-old waitress at a sports bar about an hour away. Her profile was filled with photos of beach trips, expensive handbags, and a shiny red car. In one picture, Laura noticed something chilling. The silver keychain from her truck dangling from Chloe's hand. It was like a punch to the gut. Laura scrolled further, piecing together the truth from every image and caption. A vacation in Miami last month, the same time Robert said he was attending a business seminar. A necklace she remembered seeing on a jewelry receipt. Dinners at restaurants Laura and Robert could never afford. The evidence was everywhere, flaunted in front of strangers while Laura sat at home, completely unaware. Chloe looked carefree, smiling in every photo, her youth and charm radiating through the screen. Robert had fallen for her, completely. He had promised her money, gifts, and a new life, all funded by Laura's sacrifices. He had used her savings, her truck, and her trust to impress a girl barely older than their niece. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Laura had ever felt. It wasn't just infidelity. It was theft, humiliation, and deception wrapped together. Her husband hadn't only replaced her. He had built an entirely new life using the pieces of hers. As she stared at Chloe's smiling face, a dark thought settled in her mind. Robert had taken everything from her, and she was done being the victim. Laura couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Robert laughing with the young woman, driving her truck, spending her money, living the life she had built through years of struggle. By morning, the pain had turned into something colder, determination. She needed to see it for herself. She needed proof that all of this wasn't just some cruel misunderstanding. That Friday, Laura told Robert she had a landscaping appointment in the next town. Instead, she followed him. Her heart raced as she trailed his white van through winding suburban roads, keeping a safe distance. He eventually pulled into a small cafe on the city's edge, a quiet place surrounded by trees, far from where anyone would recognize him. Laura parked 2 blocks away and waited, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Minutes later, she saw her husband step out of the cafe with Chloe. The girl was even younger than she had looked in photos, bright eyes, long blonde hair, dressed casually but stylishly. Robert looked different too, lighter somehow, as if the weight of his real life had been lifted. They laughed together, holding hands, sharing food, and leaning close as if the world around them didn't exist. Laura watched in silence, the reality hitting her harder than she imagined. Her chest ached as if something was physically breaking inside. This wasn't just an affair. It was a new relationship, built from the ashes of her marriage. Every stolen dollar, every lie, every missing night had led to this moment. She drove home in silence, her mind spinning. The anger she felt was no longer loud. It was quiet, cold, and growing stronger by the minute. Something inside her had changed forever. When Laura returned home that evening, the house felt colder than usual. Every familiar thing, the framed wedding photo on the wall, the smell of Robert's cologne, the faint hum of the ceiling fan, filled her with disgust. The life she had built with him now seemed like an illusion, a carefully staged lie. She sat on the couch without turning on the lights, staring into the darkness as her mind replayed the scene at the cafe over and over. Each laugh, each touch between Robert and Chloe, burned deeper into her memory. Hours passed, but she didn't move. The clock ticked loudly in the background, counting the minutes of her silence. The woman who had once trusted her husband completely now felt hollow, emptied of everything except rage. She thought about the years she had spent supporting him, working beside him in the sun, managing every bill, and sacrificing her own comfort for their shared dreams. It all meant nothing. He had thrown it away for someone half her age, someone who didn't even know what love or loyalty meant. When Robert came home late that night, humming to himself and smelling faintly of perfume, Laura didn't speak a word. She simply watched him move around the kitchen, pretending everything was normal. Her hands clenched tightly around the coffee mug she held, her nails pressing into her skin. She realized then that something inside her had broken completely. There was no going back to how things were. The pain had hardened into something darker, a silent, patient kind of anger that waited. Laura didn't scream or cry. She didn't beg for explanations. Instead, she planned to let the truth destroy him, just as he had destroyed her. The next morning, Laura woke with a numb calm that frightened her. The rage from the night before hadn't disappeared. It had settled into something steady and deliberate. She moved through the house like a stranger, making coffee, watering plants, and pretending everything was fine. Robert left early for work, humming as if nothing in the world was wrong. Once he was gone, she finally let herself act. She started by going through his things again, this time without hesitation. Every drawer, every folder, every secret space became fair game. She found the hidden phone first, tucked behind a stack of old manuals in the garage. Her hands shook as she turned it on. Messages filled the screen instantly, hundreds of them. Photos, hotel confirmations, private jokes, love notes. She scrolled until her eyes blurred, each message another knife in her chest. Robert had promised Chloe trips, gifts, and a new home once everything was settled. He had even texted that Laura wouldn't be a problem for long. That sentence froze her. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a plan to erase her completely. He was preparing to leave, to drain their savings, and to disappear into a new life with his lover. Laura printed out the bank statements, the messages, and the photos, laying them out neatly on the kitchen table. The truth was undeniable. The man she had spent half her life loving was gone, replaced by someone selfish, deceitful, and cruel. She stared at the evidence for a long time, breathing slowly, her mind racing toward a decision she hadn't dared to imagine before. There was no justice for betrayal like this. No apology could fix it. Laura knew one thing for certain now. Robert would never hurt her again. Robert didn't show up for work the next day. His phone went straight to voicemail, and his crew assumed he had taken a day off. Laura told anyone who asked that he wasn't feeling well. She spoke softly, calmly, her face composed, but inside, her thoughts were sharp and precise. Everything that needed to be done had already been done. By the following morning, the neighbors noticed Laura's truck back in the driveway. It gleamed under the sunlight, freshly cleaned, the smell of new leather polish faint in the air. To anyone passing by, it looked like nothing had ever happened. Laura told them Robert had returned it as a surprise before leaving for a business trip. Her voice never wavered, and her smile was practiced enough to seem believable. She began her days as usual, watering the plants, driving to clients, answering calls for the landscaping business, as though her life hadn't just split in two. But at night, she couldn't stop replaying what had happened. The argument. The moment his smirk turned into fear. The sudden, irreversible silence that followed. She had buried that sound deep inside her mind, locking it away where no one could reach it. When a week passed and Robert still hadn't returned, his friends started calling her more often. She told each one the same story, that he'd taken time off to clear his head, that he needed space. People believed her. After all, marriages sometimes hit rough patches. But beneath the surface, Laura knew the truth wasn't buried very far. The field outside town, the one they used for dumping landscaping waste, now held more than just branches and soil. A week after Robert's disappearance, one of his close friends filed a missing person report. The police arrived at Laura's home early in the morning, their presence quiet but heavy. Laura met them at the door wearing her gardening gloves, acting surprised and concerned. She invited them in, offered coffee, and told them that Robert had been distant lately, that he'd mentioned needing time alone. Her story flowed smoothly, rehearsed yet natural. The officers took notes, glancing around the tidy living room filled with family photos that now felt like props in a staged play. They asked when she'd last seen him. Laura said he had left after an argument about finances, taking some cash and saying he'd contact her soon. It was believable. Every couple argued about money, and Robert's business dealings gave him plenty of reasons to disappear for a while. The officers thanked her for her cooperation and promised to stay in touch. She watched them leave, her heart steady, her expression unreadable. Days later, detectives tracked Robert's phone records. The signal had gone dead near a rural area just outside town, the same place Laura's company often used for landscaping disposal. The lead investigator found it odd, but not immediately suspicious. They organized a small search, bringing in dogs and forensic teams. The following afternoon, one of the officers noticed disturbed soil near a rusted tool shed. It looked recently filled, too smooth compared to the surrounding ground. When they began digging, a foul odor rose from the earth. Beneath layers of dirt and tarp, they found what they had been looking for, the remains of a man wrapped carefully, his clothing still recognizable. The calm mask Laura had worn for days was about to crumble. The scene at the field quickly turned into a crime investigation. Yellow tape surrounded the area as officers, forensic teams, and photographers worked under the harsh afternoon sun. The air was thick with silence and the smell of earth. What they uncovered left no room for doubt. The remains belonged to a man in his 50s, dressed in a work shirt embroidered with the name Mitchell Landscaping. His skull showed multiple fractures, and the injuries suggested blunt force trauma. Whoever had done it hadn't acted in self-defense. It was deliberate and furious. Near the shallow grave, investigators found a tarp, a blood-stained hammer, and a shovel half buried in the dirt. Both tools were traced back to Laura's business inventory. What made the case even clearer was the discovery of tire tracks leading directly to the site, matching the tread pattern of Laura's truck. It was as if every piece of evidence quietly pointed back to her. When the detectives knocked on her door that evening, Laura answered with a calm expression, though her pulse thundered beneath her skin. They told her that Robert's body had been found. For a moment, she simply nodded, as if she had expected the words all along. They asked her to come to the station for questioning. She agreed without resistance. Inside the interrogation room, the officers laid out photographs of the crime scene. Laura stared at them, her face pale but composed. The images showed every detail she had tried to bury, the tools, the tarp, the dirt still clinging to his clothes. The calm life she had pretended to hold together was unraveling, thread by thread, and there was nowhere left for her to hide. The investigation moved quickly after the discovery. Detectives searched Laura's home from top to bottom, collecting anything that could link her to Robert's death. Inside the garage, they found traces of blood on the concrete floor, faintly visible under forensic light. In the trunk of her silver pickup, they detected dried stains that later matched Robert's DNA. Hidden behind a row of boxes, they discovered a pair of gloves and a tarp similar to the one found at the burial site. The evidence was overwhelming, and every new piece drew the circle tighter around her. On her office computer, investigators uncovered incriminating documents, forged vehicle sale papers bearing her forged signature, and recent search history that chilled even the most experienced detective. Phrases like how deep to bury a body, how long DNA lasts in soil, and how to clean blood from metal appeared in her browsing record. It was clear this wasn't an impulsive act. It had been thought out, even if in a moment of uncontrollable rage. The financial trail sealed her fate. The bank transfers and receipts she had found earlier were now evidence in reverse, proving her motive. Robert had drained their account, sold her truck, and planned to leave her penniless. The betrayal that had once broken her heart had now become her reason to kill. When police presented the findings to Laura, she tried to maintain composure, but her hands trembled as she flipped through the photos. Every lie she had told was collapsing under the weight of proof. The investigators no longer saw a grieving wife. They saw a calculating killer who had tried, and failed, to bury her sins beneath the soil she once worked for a living. When the detectives confronted Laura with the mountain of evidence, her calm exterior finally began to crack. At first, she denied everything, insisting she had been framed or that Robert had enemies from the business. But the more they questioned her, the shakier her voice became. The details she gave didn't line up. Her alibi fell apart when the security cameras from a gas station near the field showed her truck passing by on the same night Robert disappeared. Hours stretched into the night inside the small interrogation room. Laura's face grew pale, her eyes swollen from exhaustion. Finally, when the lead detective slid a photo of Robert's body across the table, her composure shattered. She lowered her head into her hands and began to talk, not fast, not loud, but in a flat, drained voice that carried the weight of everything she had done. She admitted she had confronted Robert the night he came home from seeing Chloe. He had laughed when she demanded answers, dismissing her pain as jealousy. That laugh, she said, was what broke her. She remembered grabbing the hammer from the garage, the same one she used for work. The first hit was blind rage. The rest came because she couldn't stop. When she finally realized what she had done, it was too late. Panic took over. She wrapped his body, loaded it into the truck, and drove to the field they'd often used for dumping debris. There, she dug through the hard soil until dawn. Her voice trembled as she described every step. There was no plea for mercy, no justification left. She ended her confession with a hollow whisper, that love had turned to betrayal, and betrayal to blood. Laura's confession spread quickly through the small town, shaking the community that once admired her as a devoted wife and business owner. The courtroom was packed when the trial began. Reporters filled every seat, sketch artists captured her emotionless face, and neighbors whispered about how no one had seen it coming. The prosecution painted her as a cold, calculated killer, a woman who couldn't handle rejection, who let jealousy and pride turn into violence. They described every cruel detail, the premeditation, the cleanup, the burial. Photos of the crime scene flashed on the courtroom screen, and every image seemed to drain the remaining color from her face. Her defense told a different story. They argued she was a woman pushed beyond her breaking point, betrayed, humiliated, and robbed by the man she trusted most. They showed evidence of Robert's infidelity, the forged documents, and the bank transfers that had emptied their savings. They said Laura hadn't planned murder, but had snapped under unbearable emotional pressure. The jury listened for 9 long days. Some looked at her with pity, others with disgust. When the verdict finally came, the courtroom fell silent. Laura was found guilty of second-degree murder, not a crime of cold intent, but of uncontrollable passion. The sentence was 25 years in a state correctional facility. She showed no tears as the judge read it, only a faint nod, as if she had expected nothing less. As she was led away in handcuffs, her eyes drifted toward the gallery, where reporters scribbled notes and cameras clicked. Her face was calm again, but her life, once built on love and trust, was gone forever, reduced to a cautionary tale of betrayal and rage. Years passed, but Laura Mitchell's story never faded. Her name became a grim reminder of how easily love could twist into violence. True crime shows dissected her motives, psychologists debated her mental state, and social media called her everything from a victim to a monster. Inside the walls of the women's correctional facility, Laura lived quietly. She kept to herself, worked in the prison garden, and rarely spoke about the night that changed everything. The same hands that once built a business now tended to rows of vegetables behind barbed wire. Occasionally, she received letters, some from strangers who pitied her, others from people who condemned her. She never replied to any of them. What could she say? That she still thought about Robert every day? That sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she saw him standing in the driveway smiling, as if nothing had ever gone wrong? The guilt never left. It lingered like a shadow that followed her everywhere. The truck, the one that had started it all, was eventually auctioned by the police. A new owner drove it through the same streets Laura once did, unaware of the history hidden beneath its shine. Chloe Reynolds vanished from public attention, moving to another city, her social media wiped clean. Laura grew older behind bars, her hair turning gray, her once strong hands calloused from years of labor. She rarely spoke to anyone about her past, but those who worked beside her said she often stared at the horizon in silence, as if waiting for something that would never come. The story of her life, of love, betrayal, and irreversible rage, ended not with freedom or forgiveness, but with quiet acceptance of a punishment she knew she had earned.